Ahead of Chris Eubank Jr.'s massive fight with Conor Benn, coming up in a matter of days, Chris Eubank Sr. has had some unbelievably strong words for his son, calling him a disgrace, saying that he would never be in his corner. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to this interview of Chris Eubank Sr., analysing what's got him so worked up, trying to figure out why he has such strong words for his son, before giving you my opinion on the whole matter. We'll also try and think about how this might impact Eubank Jr. ahead of what is probably the biggest fight of his career. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. Guys, do me a favor. If you're new, do please subscribe to the channel. I've got quite a lot of people watching consistently that haven't hit the subscribe button. And if you are enjoying it, it just would really help me out. Liking the video, if you like it, that's always a useful thing. But even if you don't, if you just want to help support me, bang a like on the video really helps. And I really want to get as many people engaging as possible. I know there's a lot of people that watch who have really interesting opinions on boxing that don't comment. So I want to hear from as many different diverse voices, diverse opinions as possible. So if you have a thought that you would like to share, especially during this video, it's quite a controversial one and quite a difficult one to manage my way through. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because what is at the heart of this video is the complications of a father-son relationship. Family can be difficult at the best of times, but imagine that you are about to go into the biggest night of your life where you could have ecstasy or you could have agony. Everything could be amazing or it could be absolutely terrible. Not only is your health on the line, but your potential future income is on the line, your reputation is on the line. It's an enormous amount of pressure. And if you can put yourself in those shoes and then add to the fact that your own father has come out before this occasion and said they want absolutely nothing to do with you. Not only have they done this, but they've done this on a public platform, on a video that now has hundreds of thousands of views, is being spoken about all across social media by many major sports outlets, and actually gives Conor Benn probably his only win psychologically of this entire promotion. I think that you'd find yourself in a bit of a difficult position. And so I want to talk very carefully as I go through this, because I don't want to be somebody that becomes part of the gossip column that airs the dirty laundry of this family. But at the same time, I do think Eubank Sr.'s comments are worth analysing and do have implications for Eubank Jr. on a performance level going into this fight. I think it's really interesting and important to try and analyse Eubank and figure out, is this going to help or hinder him going into this fight? Guys, one final thing. Live on DAZN, April 26th, is of course the fight that we're going to be talking about in this video. Chris Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn. Whatever you make of this fight in terms of the weight, in terms of all the things we're going to be discussing in this video, it is going to be a great event, a very, very exciting occasion. And I'm really excited for it. I can't wait to cover it. It's going to be really, really interesting. The mix of the characters, the fact Eubank Jr. is coming to the end of his career, the fact that Conor Benn has been out the ring for quite a while. We don't know what he's going to look like at 160, and he probably is the fastest guy that Eubank has ever faced. All these things basically culminate in a scenario where I'm quite intrigued. And even though it's not for a belt, like I said, I'm gonna watch it. It's a massive spectacle. So if you want to help support my channel, it's one thing you can do for me. Is use the link in the description to buy the fight through DAZN. It won't cost you anything extra. It just means that my channel gets a tiny little bit of the revenue, which really helps me, long term. I need to be generating more revenue to be able to post more videos more often, to give you the content that you like and you enjoy. So it's a small thing that you can do for me. If you use my link in the description, it will really help out, really help support the channel. I really appreciate it, guys. Cheers. Now, I want to get straight into the interview, and we're just going to watch it and react to it, react to his individual comments. I'm going to try and be as thoughtful about this as I can, because Eubank Sr. is a very, very articulate man who is very opinionated, and sometimes it can be a little hard to understand what he's trying to say to you, because he says things in a way where he sort of assumes you already know what he's talking about. I find sometimes he's quite difficult to get a read on, even though he's so emphatic with what he's saying. So let's get straight into it, and as I say, do get your comments in below about what you think about all of this.
You, Michael Watson, MB, the name, the inspiration, what does it mean to you on a fine day like this?
What it means to me is that if the rules are not adhered to, then you're going to effectively allow other fighters to lose their lives, their abilities to walk, talk, think, memorize, and effectively what's going on is a nonsense.
So the first thing we should say here is that this is a day for Michael Watson, who obviously Chris Eubank fought in his career. It was an absolutely tragic fight. Eubank landing a huge fight in the last round, huge uppercut, in the last round of the fight. And Watson unfortunately suffered a traumatic brain injury, which affects him to this day. He didn't die, but at the time there was a lack of medical attention at the fight. They didn't have an ambulance waiting. They didn't have medical staff ringside. It was obviously a very, very tragic occasion, a very, very poorly set up and run event in terms of the medical care available for the fighters. And things could have been different if Michael Watson had received treatment faster. But I think it's important to preface all of this by saying this is going to be an incredibly emotional and evocative day already for Eubank Sr. So to ask him these kinds of questions about his son, about what's going on in boxing on a day like today, you're probably going to get a more fiery, intense answer than you might do on another day. So I just want to give it that context before we proceed.
You know, with, I mean, all these boxers, all these people who are following this farce, you know, we're Great Britain and we have to abide by the rules. When the rules are being flouted and not being paid attention to, then, you know, the likes of Michael Watson, you're going to actually see this again and again and again. And it has to stop. And it's only going to stop by you, the public, putting your feet down and saying, you know what, Eubank is right. You know, there are standards that have to be upheld. There are rules that are not supposed to be trampled. And only when we actually abide by these rules will we raise the bar, as in, you know, the ability of the fighters, and stop fighters from being disabled. And I don't think I need to add anything else.
So what rules is he talking about here? What standards are we talking about here? You know, he mentions the fact we are Great Britain, we have rules and standards. It's what makes us the country that we are. And it's a multifaceted and multi-nuanced point, as I understand it, what he's saying here. I think what he's trying to say here is that, well, obviously he's referring to the fight between his son, Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. And I think he is referring to a couple of different things. The weight on both ends. So Conor Benn, who is moving up 2 weight divisions, Chris is saying that this is a dangerous act that increases the likelihood of another Michael Watson incident happening. Likewise, Eubank Jr. has a rehydration clause in his contract, yet another factor that could, again, increase the chances of a Michael Watson-like event happening. In my opinion, the rehydration clause is probably the most dangerous part of this whole thing. I believe that if a fighter moves up a couple of weight divisions, it's obviously a big risk, but there are fighters that have dared to be great and have been able to move up the weight divisions and win. And when you're that good, you can do it. And that is the thing. We're never going to find out how good somebody is if they're not able to do that. If he's talking about the rules being adhered to. But, you know, if we don't allow fighters the opportunity to become multi-weight world champions, then we're never going to find out just how good they are. Because at the end of the day, size accounts for so much in boxing. And I understand it makes it more dangerous. But that is just part of the nature of the sport in itself. And if you take this argument too far, you basically say we should ban the sport altogether. So that's the first thing I have to say. With regards to the weight jump. The second thing is with regards to the rehydration. That is where I draw the line. I have a massive, massive issue with rehydration clauses. I don't think they should ever be a thing. I honestly don't. I don't like the IBF rehydration clause. I don't like having a rehydration clause in a sort of private contract where it's agreed between the fighters, okay, I'm moving up, so you can't weigh more than X amount of weight the following day. I think in this instance, as I understand it, Eubank Jr. won't be too dehydrated because I think it's like around 10 pounds that he's allowed to rehydrate on the second day. And as I understand it, he's not that much heavier than that when he gets in the ring anyway. 170, maybe he's like 175, 180. He's not that far off it. So I think that's maybe why he's agreed to it. I do remember when he used to make 168, he always used to talk about how he would have breakfast on the morning of the weigh-in and stuff like that. So I'm fairly confident that it's not going to be a horrific weight cut for Eubank Jr., which is why it's a factor, but I don't think it's as big of a factor as when he was, I think it was, what was the last fight made out? Was it 157 with a rehydration clause? That's quite scary. And we saw what happened to him in that Liam Smith fight, having made that ridiculous weight cut. The other rules I think he is referring to, the other things he's saying that we should be abiding by are the way we behave, essentially. And he references later in the interview the egg slap, and again, I think he's talking about this. He's talking about Conor Benn swearing. He's talking about behavior in general. And we'll let the interview go a bit further, but I definitely have a few thoughts on those things as well.
You've never forgotten about Michael Watson, whereas boxing has moved forward and moved on, and I guess hasn't focused on that, and maybe to a degree has forgotten about Michael Watson to a degree.
Well, yes, okay, to a degree, to a shocking degree, an embarrassing degree. You know, Michael Watson he is charged with the name, the people's champion. And how do you not support him? It's just, is it just plaudits? Is it just lip service? I don't do lip service. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to fake. I don't know how to do the circus. I understand the noble art, and I went into it being noble. In '89, you'd remember I said boxing was a mug's game. I stuck to my guns right the way through my career, to where now we are here in 2025, and Michael is living proof that it's a mug's game. He got £400,000 from the Boxing Board of Control back in the 90s for his. That's shameful, man. That's shameful. It's like the world is not real, but this is real. And what happened to Michael will continue to happen as long as the rules are not adhered to.
There's two things here I want to talk about before it gets away from me. So the first thing is something that underpinned Chris Eubank Sr.'s career and that underpins his beliefs now and why I think he's being so forceful with what he's saying is the idea that boxing is a noble sport, a noble art. And it's true. The nature of the structure of the sport, the way the respect between two fighters exists, without those things, it would just be savagery and it would just be fighting. And so I understand why Eubank Sr. really, really buys into the concept of it being a noble sport. That and the fact that it pulled him out of very, very difficult circumstances. He grew up in hardship. He was in the Bronx, I believe it was, and he had a difficult upbringing. And boxing was something that brought him into a much better life. It brought out that gentleman persona in him. That's how he adopted it. And he always saw boxing as a noble pursuit, as something that took him from a bad place to a good place. Because to be fair to him, how can something that does such an amazing thing for your life be treated as anything other than that? Now, Eubank Sr. wasn't perfect during his career. He often treated his opponents with total disdain, but he was always very, very deliberate with his decisions in the way that he would present himself. He was always very well dressed. He was always immaculate in the way he spoke and how he articulated himself. And even though he may have showed disdain for his opponent, it was never rude. It was always done in a very clever way, I suppose. So that's the first thing, this idea of boxing being a noble sport. And I do believe boxing is a noble sport. I think the fact that it is not something that is always carried through, the way that people carry on, the way they behave, the way that fights are typically sold, is more of a damning indictment on society today. And I think something that we're going to see throughout this interview is a man who is disconnected from what society is today. And disconnected in a way, I don't mean he doesn't understand it. I mean that he doesn't like it. He doesn't want to be a part of it. And, all this social media stuff, the way that people carry on, the disrespect the average person seems to have for the other these days. It's what he's talking about is actually a much bigger societal issue, in my opinion. And I think what he says is right in many ways. Boxing is a sport that can set the example for how to treat another human being. Even in your most brutal and most savage moment, you can still be respectful and dignified. The other thing that's spoken about here, the question asked by Ames, actually, I should shout out Ames, great interview, mate. And we haven't spoken for a long time, me and Ames, but I was always very fond of him. Anyway, the question asked by Ames is, has boxing sort of forgotten about Michael Watson? And I think what that speaks to is an uncomfortable truth in society, which is we don't talk about death and we try and avoid things that are bad when they happen. Now, Michael Watson's still alive, but much like death, his tragic accident sort of gets pushed off to the side. We want to be able to enjoy the boxing. We don't want to have to think about the worst case scenario, the terrible things that can happen to a person, because it kind of undermines the entire spectacle, right? Just like with death, it kind of undermines the entire spectacle of life. And I have to say that it is a sort of a tragic and upsetting thing, and people often forget how bad things can be, how terrible things can be because of what happens in a boxing ring. And it is an uncomfortable truth. It is one of the hardest things to explain when you try and explain to someone why you love boxing so much, when you look at the damage it can do to a person. And it's something that I find hard to explain. It's a line that we have to toe. It's a philosophical and ethical dilemma that could happen to a person because of the sport that we all enjoy so much. I don't have the answers for you, but that is the truth. And Eubank Sr. there referenced the fact that the Boxing Board of Control back then paid Michael Watson, I think it was £400,000, he said. I mean, I don't know what he's talking about there. If indeed they did pay him that because of his injuries, There was certainly no such payment to the likes of Nick Blackwell, or I'm fairly confident in saying that, or any of the other guys that's happened to lately. It's a very well-known thing that there is no support for boxers where terrible things happen. It's usually through fundraising efforts and things like that. So anyway, we'll continue with it, but just a few thoughts from me there.
And shame on you, journalists. You are in positions of authority to actually steer the minds of the people correctly. The Boxing Board of Control, shame. John Morris, rest in peace. I don't understand why I abided by the rule you pointed out to me when I won that world championship on the 18th of November 1990. When you were wagging your finger in my face, yes, he's passed. But I'm going to speak to him in spirit. He wagged his finger in my face and said, remember who we are, okay? Do not bring the game of boxing into disrepute. And it's all that people are doing now. These promoters have no care for boxing and the standards of boxing and the noble art that boxing is. Noble art isn't a joke. It's a word that comes from the foundation of boxing. Noble. Not bad, no bad language. No hitting people with eggs and then actually promoting it. Is this what we are now? Is this what it's come to, man? Is this what we are? Is this who we are? Because if it's who we are, it's who your children are going to be. So if you don't want your children to become morons, then stand by and don't say anything with all this nonsense that's going on. Boxing is about rules, and it's about being noble. No bad language. Conor Benn, you swear like a possessed drunk. You're supposed to be in Christ. I believed in you. I do not believe that you did anything to do with drugs. I think you were set up. But now with this language that's coming out of you, it is said, it's not what goes inside of you that defiles you, it's what comes out of your mouth.
Before I let him continue, because he's on a roll here, and there's a load of points here we need to discuss because it's really powerful stuff and really interesting to talk about. So the first thing he's criticizing here is the fact that the promoters and people that are participating in boxing are promoting based off of things that are seen as lesser behaviors, swearing, smashing eggs in people's faces, gimmicks essentially, rather than selling what is the noble sport, the noble art of boxing, the sport itself, the technique. And look, I actually have a lot of empathy for what Eubank is saying here, and I relate to a lot of it because you'll notice on this channel, I try really hard not to swear because at the end of the day, it makes it less accessible for people. I don't think swearing is the worst thing in the world either, by the way. I swear all the time normally, but this is, something that's meant to be viewed and watched by people. So I kind of understand what he's saying with that. With regards to the egg gimmick, it really didn't bother me when it happened, and I thought it was quite a nice touch based on a lot of the things that had happened with the failed drugs test, and we'll talk about that in a moment, his opinion on that, because that is pretty startling what he just said. But what I'm trying to say is on my channel, I try and focus on the sport itself, what is going to affect the outcome of a fight, and that is basically why we're here today talking about this, because I want to know, is this going to impact Eubank Jr.? But also, he's raising some amazing points that I think are quite philosophical and worth talking about. But on my channel, I try to focus on the sport. I try and avoid the gossip column crap. Because at the end of the day, it's a load of nonsense. It means absolutely nothing. It's total dross. And if you're a boxing fan, why do you care about that stuff? At the end of the day, I understand that what makes money and what draws in a casual audience are things that transcend boxing, like smashing a guy in the face with an egg, like being a big name, like a YouTuber or whatever. And that is how a lot of this stuff is sold. But I think he's right in a sense. It does speak to a bit of a laziness, a lack of ability to actually sell the sport for what it is. And I don't know what the answers are for that, but I do know that he's not wrong when it comes to that. And when he talks about this is what your children will see, do you want your children to be morons? And I think that talks to what I was saying before about this bigger picture of society, where it's at, the way that social media works, etc. The standards of everything have slipped as a result of that. With regards to him criticizing Conor Benn being a religious man and swearing, there's many religious people that are that carry some degree of hypocrisy. I think most do, because look, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to be a religious person. There's different degrees to it, but I have some sympathy for it when, everyday life is so far from what most religions practice and teach. I do get why people mess up. And look, I have a degree in religion and theology, if those of you that didn't know. So it's something I've studied and thought about a lot. And I have a lot of respect for religious people, but at the same time, I understand it's difficult to be religious in the modern world, and people are going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. The most startling thing he said there was that, he sort of said that he doesn't like the swearing, but he doesn't believe Conor took drugs. He thinks he was set up. Unless he knows something that we don't, I think that's quite a ridiculous statement, to be honest with you, to admonish him of blame, to say that he was set up, and to say that, like, I'm not going to attack him for that. The thing that was basically the worst thing that anybody's done in relation to any of this stuff, the thing that is the most dangerous thing that somebody has done in relation to this event. Forget the weights, forget everything else, forget the gimmicks. He took drugs. He failed a drugs test. So, you know, we've never seen a test that has presented things to the contrary. We've never seen the reasons why he was cleared. Conor Benn apparently is not bound by confidentiality. I was watching a Hatman video explaining this, that Conor Benn is choosing to not share that with the public, that information. Regardless, whatever the reason is, he's being cleared. We just don't know what that reason is. For Eubank Sr to fall down so hard on everything else, to make excuses for Conor Benn failing a test, to say it's fine because I believe he was set up, but then to come down so hard on his own son, as we'll see towards the end of this interview, is really, really harsh. And I don't think it's fair. As much as I agree with a lot of what he's saying, I think that's ridiculous. And like I say, unless he knows something that we don't, I can't get on board with that statement at all.
Where is it gone? Where is the Christ personality gone? Someone's taken you over. Who's got you binded down into this? Who's destroyed your career? Destroyed it. 3 fights in 3 years? You do understand I was fighting 5 world championship fights a year. If you've had 3 fights in 3 years, same with you, Junior. If you've had 3 fights in 3 years, what happened to you guys? There are no standard bearers to steer you correctly. So you're lost. And the only way you're going to find yourselves is by looking at the rules. And the only way we're going to build a better community is by abiding by the rules. And the only way we're going to have the bar of boxing raised is by adhering to the rules. Without rules, you're baboons. I am not one of them. Rest.
Chris, just before you go, I've got a question for you. It's a serious question because you're talking about media and journalists not doing their job. I've been speaking to journalists and...
I mean, just generally speaking, I agree with just some of the comments you made there. I'll quickly say this. About, fighters used to fight a lot more. It's a double-edged sword because, yes, it's more entertaining. Yes, it's better for a fighter's career in terms of their development and their consistency to perform. But is it more dangerous? Yes. So there's a balance that has to be struck. You have to understand that Eubank Sr. is concerned about safety, but not in the context of when the rules are followed, if that makes sense. And he thinks that part of the rules should be that you fight more, which is arguably increasing the chances that something dangerous will happen. And so it's not all about managing danger. Some of it is about acting nobly, acting like a proper champion. So he's got a very, very nuanced opinion on what the rules should be, what they are, what is safe, what is not safe, and how you challenge safety. So how do we make things less safe? Well, by doing it within the confines of the rules. Sometimes the rules might make things more dangerous, but as long as they are the rules, he's okay with it. I know that was very wordy what I just said, but I think it was worth saying, maybe.
Speaking to people in the media and trying to talk about this fight and shine a light on it, I spoke to British Boxing Hall of Fame trainer Joe Gallagher, and he said to me, just hear this out, Chris, just hear it out. He said, who is going to be there if Eubank Jr. isn't making the weight safely? Who will pull him out? Who will pull him out of the fight? Are you confident that someone will be there to make sure that Eubank Jr. is safe? That's what I wanted to ask you. Can I ask that again?
I'll just give the answer.
Sure.
The answer is the fight won't happen. I am so confident about this fact. It will not happen because the rules, if this goes ahead, the rules are trashed and our nation effectively are a bunch of morons. Come back at me. Tell me whether I'm wrong, or tell me to get off of my high horse and actually get on board. Who's going to tell me to get on board in their right minds? Who's going to tell me to get on board? If I'm the one person, and it seems like I'm the one person saying, hold on a minute, guys, you're all going the wrong way. There's a term in the spiritual world called repentance. Repent. It means, if you're going that way, repent means go the other way. We have to go the other way. This way where they're taking you is to the pits. And I'm not doing that. I'm the one who created Matchroom. Matchroom would have actually, it wouldn't have superseded any of these other promoters at the time. Matchroom would not have superseded other promoters at the time if it weren't for the spirit that led me through my career. And look at what Matchroom stands for now. It's a mockery. You know, Barry, I gifted you this. You helped me, and I helped you. Without me, I couldn't give you the gift that you passed to one of your family members. Where are you, Barry?
I don't know what to make of that. It's difficult to understand what he's saying, but basically, Ames asked there, is Eubank Jr. going to be safe? Who's going to pull him out if he's not making the weight correctly? And Senior said the fight won't happen, and it's a bit speculative, and I'm making some degree of assumption here, but there's two things I think that are going on in that statement. One, because he's now talking about Matchroom. He immediately went from that to talking about Matchroom and how he made Matchroom. That Barry helped him and he helped Barry, Hearn that is. And that is how it is where it is today, and now he doesn't believe it is being conducted in the way it should be. And the fact that he went into immediately saying that he made Matchroom after saying he doesn't think the fight will happen, because if it does, then it makes a mockery, then we're all baboons. It makes me think that he believes that his word, him coming out and saying these things, means that the fight will be derailed, which is putting a lot of stock into his own weight in the situation. And I don't think that's true. So I think there's a degree of delusion there, potentially. Maybe I'm speaking unfairly. Maybe I've misunderstood him. Maybe it's because he just has confidence and faith that the right thing will happen in his opinion, which is a belief in, divine destiny, which, again, I think might be misplaced because at the end of the day, there's a lot of money involved in this fight. He may also just know something that we don't to be so confident in that statement. But the other factor, the other element here is that, the title of this video is I'll Never Be in Your Corner. He said that he won't be there with Eubank. He hasn't been there with Eubank Jr. for a long time. And I do just wonder if he is trying to remove that responsibility from himself to make sure that Eubank Jr. is okay by saying, look, it won't happen. The fight just won't happen if he's like that. But the reality is that if you're not there, Senior, he might actually get in the ring a little bit weight drained. And if you're not involved, then it might be a little bit to do with you. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that is the logic if he isn't involved. And because Junior will do whatever he wants at the end of the day. And I think he's trying to potentially avoid that reality with that statement. I might be wrong, but that's how I read that. Get in the comments and let me know what you think.
The promoters seem to want you in the corner. For some reason, they're calling for you to be in the corner. Eddie Hearn and Ben Shalom are saying, why aren't you with Eubank Jr.? Why aren't you part of the fight week activities? Why aren't you in the corner?
Because I will not be an accomplice to their stupidity, to their circus. It's against the rules, what's happening is against the rules. 147 fighting 160 is against the rules. When Kell Brook was made to fight GGG, it's against the rules. That boy had his eye socket smashed. This is what happens. The promoters, to them, it's just a game. But to the warriors, it's a way of life.
I'm actually making a video about Kell Brook at the moment. It's going to be a sort of career piece, docu-style piece. And I say making it, I've begun it. It was going to take a while, but it's a long-term project of mine. Kell Brook, one of my favorite fighters that I came into the sport watching. Eubank Sr., they're referencing him and saying, look what happens when you break the rules. Look what happens when you send someone too small up into a weight class that isn't for them. I do think that nuance is needed because you can also look at Canelo Alvarez, and he started all the way down. I think he started at 147, if not 154 was the lowest he fought. I believe he was at 147 at one point. If not, it was maybe 154, the Mayweather fight. And he's ended up all the way up at 168, even 175. And he's never been damaged to that degree that Kell Brook was in the fight against Triple G. You also have to look at who you're putting that person in there with. Triple G is one of the most destructive punchers we've ever seen at middleweight. And Kell Brook, whilst a big welterweight, couldn't withstand that. It was too much. So there is also a context to who the person is that you're putting your fighter in there with. The rules, in my opinion, can be bent in a safe way. The weights can be bent in a safe way. And like I said at the beginning of this video, you can't see true greatness without a shifting through the weight classes. So I don't necessarily agree with Senior on that point. It's difficult though, and I think without strictly following the rules, things like that will probably happen again, like what happened to Kell Brook, because we're never really sure what happened until they're in there with that bigger opponent. But look, that stuff can happen at normal weights as well. Look at Nick Blackwell and his son Senior. They were both 160-pound fighters, and that happened to them. So it's a difficult one.
And we have to call them what they are. They are trash. They're trashing us. We are not trash. We are the standard bearers.
But even imposing a fine per pound for every pound he comes over.
I'm not even interested in. That's all a distraction. From what? The rules. The rules have to be adhered to. When I talk to you about rehydration clauses, sure, that's very, very important. But I don't need to talk about that. That's a distraction because the rules have to be adhered to. If the rules are abided by, then we don't have to talk about rehydration clauses, which actually kills fighters and puts them in the position that Michael Watson is in.
Just quickly, I want to say that yes, rehydration clauses put the fighter at much greater risk because the brain is more dehydrated, it's more susceptible to punches, it's more susceptible to brain damage. As far as I understand it, there was no medical findings that Michael Watson was affected by dehydration in his brain damage. He was fighting at a normal weight, super middleweight, so a weight he'd fought out before. And as I understand it, that was not considered to be a defining factor in the injury. But I will say this: fighters, you cut weight to make the designated weight all the time, and so it probably was a massive factor, to be honest. It happens all the time though, and I do believe as a general point that weight draining in boxing is out of control. I think fighters will push it and push it and push it, and I don't think it's right. But I also don't think putting rehydration clauses into contracts makes it any safer because fighters are still going to do it. The IBF check weight on the day of the fight, fighters are still going to do it. Look at John Boots Ennis. Finally had that removed. Suddenly he looked energized and full again. His legs were good on the fight. So it just makes people push themselves into even more dangerous places rather than actually trying to fight at closer to their natural weight.
I see my son. I see the mistakes that he's walking into, only looking at the money. The money will get you killed. If you're not clever and if you're not noble, this will kill you, this vocation, what they call sport. It is sport, again, to the spectators. To you, the fighter, it is a way of life. And if you don't play it right, already, Conor, you don't have a career to enjoy. You'll look back and your children will look back at your greatest ever fight. And your greatest ever fight will be the one which was promoted bigger than any other fight. And nothing is going to get bigger than what you've done with the circus. And your children are going to be listening to you swear. How could you do that to them? How could you do that? I know you have, 2 children? How could you do that to them? Because they're going to listen to you and they say, well, if Dad does it, then I can do it. Junior, you're smashing an egg against this guy's face. I taught you that. I didn't teach you that. Who taught you that? Did Karen teach you that? Who taught you that? That's disgraceful. I'm gonna stand in your corner. You must be mad. You must be mad. I would never be in your corner. You're a disgrace. You're smashing an egg in someone's face and then you're saying you're trying to justify it. There's no justification for that. There's nothing noble about that. Seconds out. You're welcome.
So there it was, the big finish where he called his son a disgrace and said there's no justification for smashing the egg in Conor Benn's face. I have to say that very powerful interview. I often struggle to keep up with Chris Eubank Sr, to be honest. I find the way that he talks so definitive but vague at the same time that sometimes I just can't really follow him. But I've done my best to try and break it down. That final statement was brutal. I think it was really harsh, and I think it was it unfair? I think behind closed doors, that's something you can tell your son that you don't respect, you don't appreciate. But to do that on a public platform, I don't agree with. I don't agree with the context of what his son is about to go into, and I believe in supporting your family no matter what, in public in particular. I think behind closed doors, you can, have a conversation and you can, say you don't agree with something and you can try and get someone to be different. But I really, really don't agree with what he's done there. I think that's brutal. I think it's harsh. But he's clearly so disgusted by his son's behavior that he has decided that he feels like it's okay to say it on that platform. I could argue that you could never justify going out in public and shaming a family member like that. I mean, I don't think there's any justification for that, much like he feels there's no justification for smashing the egg in Conor's face. I think that it's much better to say, and much more realistic to say, there's no justification for having performance-enhancing drugs in your system, and yet he seemed to be okay making an excuse for Conor Benn, and yet he can't understand why Eubank Jr. would want to smash the egg in Conor's face when you consider the context of what that will do for the fight, what it will do for the numbers of the fight. And I know that his senior doesn't care about any of these things, but you could at least be empathetic towards it. You go, look, I don't care about money. I care about the noble art, but I understand why my son, who is caught up in the modern day society that we live in, look at the way social media works, look at all the things it glorifies, to be more empathetic towards that than you are towards Conor Benn somehow getting peds in his system, I think is absolutely I don't want to swear, but it's crazy after what we just talked about. It's crazy. I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong. I think it's unfair. But guys, get in the comment section below and let me know what you think. Do you think that this was brutal and unfair? The question I want to try and answer before I go is Eubank Sr. right? What I'll say is I think he's right about a lot of things in this video. I think that the world would be a lot better if we had rules that people abided by that were good for society. I think things would be more honorable and more dignified if it was based on boxing the sport rather than boxing the circus, which is what it often turns out to be. But I really, really don't disagree with him, airing his grievances with Chris Eubank Jr. like that, especially as I'll say it again, Eubank Jr. is about to go into one of the biggest moments of his entire life, and to make it harder for him, I don't know, man. And to not be there with him, I mean, if it was me, I'd want to be there. But what else can I say? It's Eubank Sr. It's his opinion today. You guys might really disagree with me, and that's completely fair and completely fine. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comment section below. Please subscribe to a guy called Henry. Bang a like on this video. I will say this before I go. Do I think this will affect Chris Eubank Jr.? I must say that before I go. Honestly, this is probably something he's been dealing with behind closed doors for quite a long time. He's probably already been called a disgrace by his father behind closed doors. If we're seeing it now, I doubt it's the first time it's happened. So I believe that Chris Eubank Jr. will be prepared for this already. I think he'll be okay. He probably always knew that his dad wasn't going to be in the corner for the fight. And as I said before, in the build-up to this fight, the only barb that Conor Benn has been able to throw at Junior is that your dad doesn't want to be there on the night. That's it. There's nothing else. Eubank Jr. is winning psychologically in every other category, but it is a big barb to throw, and it will be upsetting for Eubank Jr. But I think the kind of character he is, from what I can see from the outside, is that it will probably just make him even more defiant, because I think he's that kind of guy, and I think he is incredibly mentally tough, Eubank Jr. That is what I think. And I'm going to be working on my game film analysis, guys, over the next couple of days, and I will get that out for you so we can see how I'm analyzing the fight. And I'll, of course, be making a final prediction before the event. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. And as I always say, on to the next one.